Hi, I'm Amanda, and I'll be one of your hosts for this episode of Chic Chat. Chic Chat is the place where we celebrate the perfect fusion of style and adventure. Jeeps have long been synonymous with ruggedness, freedom, and the spirit of adventure. And who says women can embrace all that and more?
Exactly. And I'm Wendy. I'm actually on the Jeep Talk Show, different episodes, but also Chick Chat. So I'm so happy to be here with you, Amanda. It's been a little minute, but you know what? We're going to get through this and have some fun. So anyway, I thought a good topic would be to talk about how to pick your line. Now, we're not talking about, which line at the grocery store, because that's the first thing someone's going to say. What line are we talking about? We're talking about when you're new and maybe you're not sure how to drive and you're learning all kinds of things about your Jeep and how do you pick your line. So I'm just going to kind of jump in if you don't mind, and let's just have some fun with it. What do you think?
Sounds good. And I can't wait because I know that you are a world-class spotter, and I feel like I'm going to learn some things in this episode.
Oh, boy. Here we go. There's no pressure now.
None at all.
Well, thank you for that intro. I love it. So, well, one thing we do when we start with a new driver is that you need to approach an obstacle. If you're out wheeling and you're on just basic, simple roads, you probably don't even think about your line. You don't think about where your tires are, and you don't think about what you would need to do. But what we want to talk about is what happens if you come across something in the road, maybe a rock obstacle, maybe it's some washout, something like that. You need to sort of think about, what would I need to do? Where do I need to put my tires? And that's what we call picking a line. So a lot of people sometimes will just drive and they don't care. And you know what? There's some fun to that. If you're experienced and you're out there and you're just like, I'm going to tackle this line and I don't care whether or not I get over, I can back out, I can do something else. So, but if you're new and you're trying to think, what's the best way to do it? I think that's what we'll just kind of dive into. So one of the first things I like to do is be able to get the driver out of their driver's seat and go look at it. So a lot of times when we have new people learning to drive, they are sitting behind that seat. They're super, feeling control because they got the steering wheel. And then you come across an obstacle. Let's just say it's maybe something that has some rocks to it. It's a washout. Weather came in. It was a normal road, 3 months ago when you drove it. And now it's got this washout. It can look very sort of intimidating. So I like to have the driver look at it from both perspectives. And what I mean by that is, look at it get out of your Jeep, stand in front of your Jeep and look at the obstacle. What are you looking for? You're looking for things that are sort of giving you what stability are these rocks going to move or are they stable? And you've been on trails, Amanda, where you've seen, where rocks move. Those are the fun part, trying to wheel, right? You've done that. Mm-hmm. And then you have permanent ones that don't move, meaning that the rock formation stays in one place. So for like us here in Big Bear, California, Southern California, Gold Mountain, those rock formations are there forever. I mean, eventually they'll probably wear down, but they're not going to move. Where if you get into things like John Bull or some of these other obstacles that we have, the rocks actually move, right? They will just underneath your tires. And you've had that experience, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of what you're talking about, getting out, because it may look like it's one thing. Then you get out and you're walking on it and you're putting feet on it before you put tires on it, and it's another.
Yeah, exactly. So be careful when you do that. But we want you to have the driver's perspective. So standing in front of the Jeep, you're going to look at that. Now, you are looking for things that are on the rock. So when people are doing these, quote, climbing and or doing different formations, they do leave some what we call shiny parts. I know you've seen this. You've hit your diff. You've done something and maybe there's a shiny or thing. That is a first indication when you're new that you want to put your tires on things that are shiny like that, because it means that that's probably a high point somewhere in that obstacle. And rather than straddling it, which is what most people think to do, oh my gosh, it's a rock, I'm going to put it in the center of my Jeep. Well, you do know that on most Jeeps, you have that diff is sitting about where the driver is, and then you have the one in the back is definitely in the rear. So your right side or your passenger side gives you the highest clearance in your Jeep. So if you have no option and you need to straddle something, try to put that obstacle over to the right side or the passenger side of your Jeep, because that's going to be your highest clearance. Now, let's go back to, we're not trying to worry about that, but we're going to put our tires on the highest obstacle. And Amanda, can you imagine what that would do if we put our tire on that shiny point that's got a little bit of a lift to it? All of a sudden, you've got clearance.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So even if you're in a stock Jeep or you're in a very just mild lifted Jeep, one thing we don't have is enough clearance, right? Because your diff, that big old pumpkin in the center, is hanging down the lowest. We call it the lowest hanging fruit. So what's going to happen is you're trying to decide, how can I go through this obstacle, not scrape, not pop open that pumpkin and have a big old leak, but obviously get through that whole obstacle the most and simple way. Now, if you have passengers on board, this is a good one too. I mean, is we want to make sure that we give them a good experience. We don't want to be jostling them back and forth and falling or tipping or doing things like that. So that's another thing to think about, is where can I put my tires? So if you find shiny stuff left behind, that's one of the easiest ways, is like, I'm going to put a tire here and then put it here. The other thing is to think about is, what kind of tires do you have? And we'll talk about that in another episode on good tires. But what is their sidewall like? Sometimes we've had to go through like a wedge, and you need the sidewall of your tires to actually grip and go through an obstacle. So again, these are things to think about. But let's suppose that you have two high point rocks. They have shiny stuff on them, and you're going to go ahead and put your tires on them. Now, the other thing I suggest is to get down behind that or in front of that obstacle. So you're looking at it from a driver's standpoint, but now you're going to walk and go through it and then look back up at it. And I like doing this, Amanda, especially with new people, because the first thing they think of is, oh my gosh, this is so scary. I don't think we can go here. We have to turn around. But when you look at it from the driver's perspective and then you walk through that obstacle and look back up it, it's a whole nother view, and you can actually see the line. Hey, I see that shiny spot. I'm going to put my tire there. I know this is going to happen. It also plays a little bit with your brain, and you're like, oh, this isn't so bad. So that as you're going through it and you're going to go super slow, guess what? It isn't as bad as your brain made it out to be. Do you have any thoughts on that? Have you done that yourself, Amanda, and walked and looked at it from both perspectives?
Yeah, absolutely. Because sometimes you can pull up on an obstacle, and especially as they get more challenging and you're looking at it, and sometimes you're looking at it like this, it can be really intimidating. And sometimes if it's a ledge, right, and you're going to crest over that ledge, you need to know what's on the other side. So it's always good, I think, to get out and put feet on it before you put tires on it, especially if it's something more challenging, it's something where you're going to have a spotter, and having a spotter is great. But if you're learning and you want to kind of understand what your Jeep is going to do, getting out and walking it and really getting a feel for it, and the terrain that you're going to wheel over, I think that's super important.
Well, and two, I mean, as we say always, when you're new, even when you're not new, you need to be going out with somebody else. And if that person is picking a line, as we call it, you're going to watch them. Did they get hung up? Did they get stuck? Did they leave shiny parts behind? Those are all things that are clues to you as a new driver to say, you know what? I don't want to take that line. I want to do something different. So the first and easiest way is there's shiny parts. Now, let's say that there isn't shiny parts. It's just a basic obstacle. You're going to be looking for some of those higher points. Where can I stick my tires? This is also a good reminder that part of learning to drive is, do I know the width and length of my vehicle? And the reason I say that is because a two-door tracks differently than a four-door. A four-door tracks differently than a Gladiator. So depending on the vehicle you have and the setup, you also need to be looking at someone else going through that obstacle with the same length of vehicle that you have. Now, one of the quickest ways to learn width and length is get out and do it. I'm sorry. If you want to do a practice in a parking lot and try to make a sharp turn into a parking spot, you're going to see that your rear tires did something funny. They didn't track the same way that your fronts do. And I think one of the biggest things that I notice with new drivers is they've got that front steering wheel. They can turn those wheels exactly how they want them, but they're not keeping in mind what's happening in the rear. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Rear tires, they don't track like the fronts. And what I'm talking about is, if you've ever seen a bus or a big semi go, right? The semi has to go super wide to be able to make those rear tires make that sharp turn. It's kind of the same thing with your vehicle. So we have a four-door. It's pretty easy to figure out that just about where behind my seat is my turning radius to be able to make a sharp turn. But what happens with people who line up for an obstacle is they only think about their front tires. So maybe you're coming in from a curve or a turn and you're like, wow, why are my rear tires hanging off something? Or they're hanging off the ledge, like you said, right? And We've all seen that. Even turning a sharp edge when you're on a trail and you're going around a corner and you're wondering, why did my rear tires clip that bush? Well, you got to accommodate for that. So this is the same thing with lining up. In a perfect world, you would have plenty of time to go perfectly straight into that obstacle. You stopped far enough back, you got out, you took a look forward, you took a look backward, and you could say, I need my tires to be right here. Perfect. Now, if you're using a spotter, we're not going to go too deep into that on this episode. Use the spotter, please. Let the spotter direct you through, even if you think you know it, even if you think you got it. If you use a spotter, please use the spotter. Don't stop halfway or stick your head out or say, I don't need to look at you. Anyway, we'll talk about that in another episode, Amanda, because spotting is a lot of fun. But anyway, so once you've done that, if you understand how those rears are going to track, you can accommodate for that. The other thing I'm going to say to you is that as you start to go through that obstacle and you've got yourself lined up, don't forget the rear tires. I'm sure you've seen this a lot, Amanda. People go over an obstacle, they're like, woohoo, I'm free. And they forget they got 2 more tires behind them. And then it's like thunk or bang or, oh my gosh, I left shiny metal. How did that happen? Yeah. So what you have to do is remember that as you're going through those fronts, you allow that front tire to tell you. Remember, I talk a little bit about feeling your Jeep. If you've been listening to me on the Jeep Talk Show, I talk about it all the time. You got to learn to feel your Jeep. I know it's a piece of metal, but there are things that the tires tell you, the amount of how far did you go up? How far are you dropping off? That's all indication to help you with those rear tires. So as you go through that obstacle and you go, hey, I remember seeing this was going to be a little drop, not a big deal, but I got to wait a little bit more. Oh, there's my rears now dropping. So this is easy to do on simple little rocks in the road. You can purposely put your front tire on it and say, hey, I'm going to feel like, oh, I'm going up. And then how long does it take me to get to my rear? Oh, there's my rear. So you can also learn to do that. This is a fun exercise. I don't know if you've ever done this, Amanda, where you try to line that front and rear up and see if you actually got it right. And that's how you learn your width and length of your Jeep. So have you ever done that where you're on a trail and you're like, I'm going to hit both of those tires?
Yeah, I have, because it's exactly what you're saying. A lot of times, and I've been guilty of it myself, when I was first starting, you're wheeling for the front and not the rear, right? And then you slide off the line. And then sometimes once you're off the line, you're off the line. Then you're reversing and you're trying to figure it out. You have to have that in mind when you go onto the obstacle. So sometimes you have to, overcorrect, for lack of a better term, to get your rear tires where they need to be by picking your line a little bit differently in the front.
Yeah. And essentially what I'm trying to say is if you got those front tires on a rock as an example and you think I'm clear, and then you start to turn your fronts because you think you're off, maybe the trail goes that way. You have to remember that you got to go that perfect straight line, if it's a straight line, and you got to go until those rears are clear, because even a little slight movement of that steering wheel, it will completely pull those rears off. And that could be the difference of breaking something, getting hung up to the point where you can't get pulled out. You're going to need someone to come and actually lift you out, with a jack or get you towed. There are times when you could get yourself hung up on a rock that's moving, for example. And this is really super important when you're going over rocks that move as opposed to being stationary. Stationary rocks like Gold Mountain, that's there. And I'm sure at Hidden Falls, they're probably permanent, I would guess, Amanda? Like
in some places, but in some places in Hidden Falls, it's loose rock. So you have to account for that.
Exactly. And the movement that we talk about is called crawling. This is what we do over rocks. It's not high speed. Can I just hit it and push it? It is called crawling, and crawling is a lot of fun. But what happens is if you give too much momentum to get up and over, you could shoot that rock out underneath. It could get stuck underneath. It could get wedged between a tire. And all of a sudden now you are literally stuck. So the reason I bring this up is when you're new, you need to take everything slow when you're going over obstacles and when you're trying to do it. Again, you're learning to feel what those tires are telling you. And feeling is amazing because you literally do not have to look out. You've already taken a peek at that obstacle, the front, and then looking backwards. You know that you're going to have a little drop off. Maybe one rock is a little bit lower than the other. And you're already prepared for that. But you can sit there and feel, when is the tire? Oh, there's the drop. I feel it. Okay, great. And then you wheel through it and you get those rears. Super important not to change your trajectory too soon without those rears being corrected. And that is super important when you're first starting out, because I see that all the time. I'm free. bam. And then you're coming down hard. We have a cute little saying that we say is control your rear. I think that's funny. And basically what it means is when you know you're coming off of a ledge or a rock, that rear has to get through that. So you don't want to be slamming the bumper. You don't want to be breaking things. You don't want to come off too hard and too fast. So that's basically it. Now, what do you think we're going to do, Amanda, when that obstacle has got like a sharp turn within the obstacle? Any thoughts on that for picking your line?
So, I mean, you're going to have to compensate for that in your line. And one thing that you're talking about when control your rear, I have a little tip while we're talking about that is, so I have the little round stick-on mirrors that I put in the corner of my rear view mirrors that I have pointed so I can see my rear tires when I wheel.
Love it. Nice.
So that I can see exactly. Okay, so maybe it is something like you're talking about where you need to turn, or there's another obstacle you need to somewhat line up for when you're going over this one. I see what my rear tires are doing because I know I may have to turn or whatever, so I can steer accordingly to that.
Yeah, exactly. You do almost drive with your rears in mind as opposed to fronts. And I think, too, that is a great suggestion because when you have, like a lot of our regular roads to get to these obstacles, they might have a sharp turn. And maybe it's one of these that has like a dip in it. It always makes you feel funny when you're a little off camber. Be looking in your rearview mirror as you do that, you can start to learn the length of your vehicle because you think you have to go a little bit straight before you make that turn. People just take it like you do on a road. Well, highways and stuff are designed by city engineers that they know what that angle is to do it. So you don't even pay attention when you're driving your car that you just make a turn. But if you've ever tried to park in a parking lot, going to the grocery store, and you were super close to that parking space, and then you made that sharp turn, you realize that now you've got to back up, straighten it out, and come back in. It's the same exact theory on dirt. So when you're around something that's super sharp, you got to think about, hey, I've got a four-door. I got to go straight, almost like I'm going to run into the side of the mountain before I make the turn so that I can check those rears. Now, having a mirror either pointed down or, like Amanda said, a little tiny guy, you can actually quickly see, was I this far? Was I this far? Oh my gosh, was I touching? That will teach you how far you need to do that to make a turn. Same thing happens when we come to an obstacle. Sometimes you don't have a straight line to your obstacle. You're coming in at a slight angle. So the best suggestion I can make for that is that you almost need to overcompensate. So if your obstacle is here, you might need to start your fronts over here and get yourself, because you're thinking about your rears. If you came in like this to make this turn, your rears are not going to track. They're going to miss it completely, and that could be disaster. Or it could be, hey, I got to start over again. So the other thought is if you come a little bit wide before you make the turn, maybe the fronts aren't exactly where you want them, but you know those rears are going to track perfectly to get up and over. And I don't know, does that make sense, Amanda? Maybe I need to say it a little differently, or does it make sense? Tell me.
No, it makes sense. And so this is what Micah says. Micah's a truck driver. So he says, go straight, turn late.
Yes. Oh, I like that.
Which is
Can I borrow that?
Yes, of course. So that's what he says in the 18-wheeler, right? Because you're pulling a trailer. So you're going straight and you don't want to pull that trailer over the curb. Yeah. So you have to go straight and turn late to get the trailer to follow you around the corner. It's the same concept on an obstacle, but smaller. So yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of this is you've got to go out and practice. You do need to get out and watch other people. If you are brand spanking new, I definitely recommend you go with somebody. Hopefully they have a little more experience, and you can need to get out and watch. So you're going to look for, how did they line the vehicle up? Hopefully they're going slow enough that you can actually see and feel, you're not going to feel it for them, obviously, but they're feeling it. And then how did they handle the rear? Because that's super important. And sometimes if you hit an obstacle super hard, you can actually bounce your Jeep and move your line. So you don't want to be going at it too hard. Now, there are times when we do see YouTube videos. I've been on trails when sometimes you have to give a little push because maybe you're going straight up. There's an obstacle in Gold Mountain where you really got to learn how to feather that throttle. You got to give it a little bit of oomph, but then you got to also be able to get off of it so that you're not making yourself move that line too far. But there's times when you can just be hitting that throttle and literally the back end is moving and you're off the line. You just got to back up and start over again. There is no way that you're going to recover from that. So again, when you're new, try to watch somebody else go through and look for those things. You yourself, super simple. look at that obstacle. Don't let your brain think, oh my gosh, this is so huge. Every obstacle that I've ever done, even when my brain says that, I'm like, let me go look at it. Let me see where's going to be my points. Where do I want to make sure? How do I need to overcompensate with that front? Maybe I'm directing it one way so that I can then turn into it at the last moment and my rears are going to be straight. So again, when you're in the middle of an obstacle that has a turn in it, because there are those all over John Bull, by the way, nothing is ever perfectly straight. You have to come into it a different angle. There's one section where you have got to almost like you don't even look like you're on the line. Like I've gone somewhere else. And then you're going to turn into it because you need the rears to be lined up perfectly. Those are kind of fun. But if you're in the middle of an obstacle and you know that it's making this jagged turn, you will then have to almost hold it as long as you can before you make the turn, because you are looking, like Amanda said, look in your mirror. What are my rears doing? And practice that. So anyway, that's kind of my little tip for picking a line. If you want to practice this, you can take cones, go to an empty parking lot. You could use the parking spaces as one of the easiest and drive like you normally do and go, I'm going to turn. Get out and see, where did your rears land? Okay. Had you gone just another wheel or two of your tire rotation and then made the turn, you'll be in your parking space. Perfect every single time. The other thing too is, depending on your length, like a 4-door, I might want to start a little bit away from the parking space to make the turn because I know that my rears have got to make that angle. So again, great option is to practice. Practice makes perfect sometimes, but getting out and looking, understanding where am I going to place my tires. And remember too, that there's probably on every obstacle, Amanda, you can agree or disagree on this one. There's probably 2 to 3 lines for every obstacle. The really hard line, the really, oh, hell no line. And then there's the, I'm taking that line.
Yes,
as
ma'am.
I call it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like you said, watching other people is invaluable, because maybe even if it's not a line that you're prepared to take today, or something you're working up to, the hardest line, seeing their Jeep and seeing how it tracks and things like that is invaluable. And if it is somebody taking the same line that you're going to with a similar build, you can kind of see, okay, well, right there, it's off camber. That's not going to feel really good. Oh, well, I can expect my passenger tire to drop there. And you just kind of know what to expect. So when it just gives you a little bit more comfort, I think, if you've been able to watch somebody, especially when you're new and learning. Yeah.
The other thing too is, I'm just going to remind everybody, it's little tiny increments in your steering. I see a lot of people get up and they want to do this. And part of it is our brain is trying to take control. We've looked at the obstacle. We think we've got it all down. But when we get behind that driver's seat, we assume that because my tires went up and I felt it, now I can turn. It's minor little things. So if you have a spotter, the spotter's job is to be your eyeballs. And when you're listening or hopefully watching, I spot with no verbal, by the way, and I know people do verbal, and there's all kinds of ways. There's hand signals and things like that. But for me, it's being nonverbal. So I'm going to take your steering wheel. I'm going to tell you how much to move. You need to make sure that you're doing little tiny increments. If your spotter is saying, driver, and you go to give driver, let's see, that'd be I did that wrong. Driver. No, driver. I did that right. Yay! I'm wondering how the camera's picking that up. That was pretty funny. But anyway, if you are, driver, does it mean this much? Does it mean this much? Does it mean whatever? It's better to take little tiny increments. The spotter will ask you for more. Driver, driver, driver. It's better to do that than to go driver. And spotter meant this much and you took this much, you're off the line. So keep in mind when you're new that everything is slowed down. It's relaxed, it's fun, and just little tiny movements, especially when you're up and over things. Learn to feel what your Jeep is doing. It is so invaluable when you go out to understand what's happening with those tires. And maybe a tire is being shoved up into that well. Maybe it's just, grabbing over those rocks and it's kind of coming over nice and smooth. Everything is done in a controlled setting. Yes, YouTube, you're going to see people hitting it, throttle it out. You can do it. And they're spinning tires and doing stuff. It's not going to give you a good experience. And it's not necessary for almost all the obstacles that we've ever done. I mean, seriously, occasionally you need a little bump, but that's it. We're not, spinning tires and trying to, figure that's going to get us up and over. So everything is super, super calm. So anything else you want to add to that?
Well,
Amanda? Because I know you've been out wheeling too.
just a few times. But like you said, with it, there's a time and a place for like the rock bouncers and all that stuff and the throttle it out and all that. But especially since we're talking more to the crowd of learning and things like that, just giving her hell, you could tear up the trail. You could sling a rock out and you could hit someone with it.
Absolutely.
If people are standing around watching the line, or, trying to learn themselves. So it's just things like that. You can make it more difficult for the next person if you're just there digging it out. So just, for me, it's, a consideration thing. It's a trail etiquette thing also.
I know, because we want to do tread lightly and make sure that we're preserving things and all that. But, the other thing too, when you're new, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And that is one of the things that we sort of do in the show, is to try to give you that comfort to know some things, but you still have to go out and experience it. Mm-hmm. Now, if you are at an obstacle and the spotter is yelling and he's screaming, whatever, and everybody in front of you is getting stuck, you have the ability to ask for a different spotter, or you can try it yourself. We try to push and promote, mentoring. Those of us who have experience, which Amanda and I are doing, we want to share with you guys and give you that knowledge. There are going to be some runs that you're on, or groups, and you don't know who they are. You don't know anybody, and you don't even know that this guy's yelling or that this person's getting stuck. You have the ability to do, because you're the driver of your vehicle, you can not follow somebody, you can follow somebody, but just tell them, I don't want to use a spotter, or I'm going to use, whoever, and go for it. Know that there's a bunch of knowledge in that group, good and bad, lots of knowledge, lots of experience, and there's expertise, and then there's, who thinks they're experts, and then there's people who do have knowledge. So try just to be understanding that everybody's wanting to help. If you're the driver and you're new and you've got 3 people screaming at you or yelling commands, you can demand one person. And I talk about this when you do spotter. To me, when I get up to an obstacle, it's almost fun to get out and watch, because if it's a husband and wife team, it's going to be a show. I feel bad. She's trying to give directions. He's screaming at her, or vice versa. Maybe she's driving and he's screaming at her. It doesn't need to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. So I'm giving you that so that you don't go to a run and think that's what we do. But at the same time, you do have some control over what you're doing. It's okay to say, I'm new. I'm going to take it super slow, and you take it at your speed, okay? You will hear clunks. You're going to hear some drops. You're going to hear some metal creaking. That's very normal in Jeeping, by the way. I don't care how you try to get rid of it. I don't care how new your Jeep is. You're going to have. So I just want to share that with people, because sometimes when we're new, we think, oh, I don't really know anything. I'm not going to go till I learn. Well, you got to go learn. You got to go hang. So anyway.
Yeah. And I definitely want to echo what you said. I've done that a ton of times. I'll be out with a group and maybe, it's a spotter, like I'm going to try something really gnarly. And I'm with Micah or a friend or somebody. I'm like, hey, I want you to spot me. Or maybe they're spotting up a line, but I want to try something a little different. I may say, hey, I'm going to take this line, but do you mind like just kind of keeping an eye to see, my passenger side, where it's going to be. It's okay to communicate those things and, ask the spotter to do something else. And I am the first one. If there's a bunch of people out there yelling this, that, and the other, I'm like, no, one person.
Yeah, one person
give
please.
Me direction.
Exactly.
I can't take 1,000 people yelling direction at me. I don't need that. I need one person to clearly communicate with me.
And to be fair, everybody wants to help. That's the cool thing about our sport. Everybody loves to help. But when you're new, you cannot take in 4 different people, because you're like, driver, passenger, go forward, back up, slow down. And you're thinking, what do I do? That's not how you're going to learn. So it's okay for you to say, can just one person, please, I'm new, or I can't, then you're rolling up your windows and you can't hear. Most spotters out there are going to use verbal commands. They're going to say driver or passenger. They're going to say slow, stop, come, that kind of stuff. So when you catch us back another episode, I will go through spotting, how I do it, and talk about spotters, good spotters and bad spotters, because I think that's important too, is that when you're learning, you just want to understand what's the spotter's role? And if you're experienced and you want to learn to spot, you need to listen, because sometimes we can also help you. I've seen it on both ends. I've done a lot of different things on that, and I just want to make sure that we're passing that on. But this is talking about picking a line, so let's not get sidetracked, because I love talking about it.
Well, and maybe, okay, so if we're talking about getting out and watching, right, and you're watching people go over the line, maybe you're standing in a different position where you are seeing something that maybe the spotter's not. It's okay to communicate that. But me, if I can, I will say that to the spotter. Hey, they're going to get hung up on their diff, or, it's undercut on the rear passenger, whatever, to the spotter. So then the spotter can communicate that to the person driving. I just feel like, to me, that saves a lot of chaos.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard, because if you're new, and someone's been doing it for 20 years, they're not going to want to hear from you. I'm sorry. I mean, it just happens. And I'm sorry to say that. But at the same time, if I look at safety things. So, I have experience. I can be out with a group and I can watch the chaos unfolding. As long as people are going to be safe, I tend to stay out of it, because I don't want to be the know-it-all girl, and I don't want to have a guy look at me, because unfortunately guys do look at us girls who do have knowledge and experience and think, oh, what does she know? And it's okay. I personally like to just sit back and say, when they need my help, they'll get it. But for me, I like to let people have sort of that experience, because sometimes a new person needs to understand that when they turned a little too much, they caused the fall off the rock. And what did that feel like? And what did that sound like? So unless there's a safety issue, where someone's in the way, or it's going to be a bad wreck if they go that route, then I will definitely step up and say, excuse me, can we just take a look at this for quick? Can you see what's happening? And maybe the spotter sees something that I don't see at the front of the vehicle versus where I'm standing at the side of the back. So be careful when you're watching and on the sidelines, because we all have knowledge. We've all have experience. We've all been through different things. Luckily for us, we wheel enough on these trails, like you do in your trails in Texas, some of the pitfalls. So it's very easy to help a newbie and say, hey, your wheel is going to go down. It's just nothing that we can do about it. We have a spot on John Bull where it used to be, when I was new, I thought it was 6 feet tall. It's not, but it might be 4 feet. I mean, seriously. So when you come off of it, you got to be almost straight, but you're going to drop. And that's a weird feeling when you're new. And if your tires aren't straight on that and you're twisted, you're going to break. So you got to know. So those are things when you can say, look, you're going to come down this. This is how it's going to feel. This is what you're going to experience. You got it and you're okay. Keep your foot on the brake. Done. So whatever you're given those instructions as a new driver, and picking your line and going off a line and going on an obstacle, do whatever they say, because I can see things that the driver can't see. And that's the cool thing about spotting, is that you actually get to see things, and you get to, I think for me, we'll sidetrack for a minute. I think for me, learning how those the rear tires tracked, the best way I learned it was watching other people go through obstacles. Because I can tell you now, when someone starts, okay, that's coming off. And it happens. It's almost instant, So I think getting out and just watching is the coolest thing for learning to pick your line. And you're watching those people go through it, and you're watching what is happening. So, yeah. Do you have any obstacles that you've been on that you can recall and try to describe where you knew there was going to be an issue picking that line? Like it's a tough obstacle. Can you think of any that come to mind really quick?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few at like Wolf Caves, one that we did for Apex Adventure Series. It doesn't have a name or anything. It's that cool rock over there. I mean, it's if you do not get on that line the very first time, if you get off of it in any way, that's it. You have to be winched up. You cannot back out of it because it's straight up vertical. And
my gosh,
your bumper will put, and you have to get up, and then you have to hook it driver and, kind of pull yourself up, and it's a gnarly obstacle. But if you don't get on that line exactly right, the first time, then you're done. But you have to think about the rear, like you're talking about, immediately. Yeah. So you have to get up there, you have to pull up, you have to back up a couple times and get yourself immediate lined up, because you got one shot.
I love
because
that.
if those rear tires aren't exactly where they need to be when you crest over the top, it's it. And then you have to winch up. And it's so satisfying once you make it, but sometimes it takes a lot of practice and a lot of unsuccessful attempts to make it.
Well, and that's a good one too, where you really need to probably use a spotter and also get out and look. So even if you're going to use a spotter, go learn your knowledge kind of thing. I have 2 spots that I'll share because people in Southern California probably know these spots. We have a trail called Holcomb Creek, which is one of the Badge of Honors trails out here, along with John Bull and Gold Mountain in Big Bear. And it is, it's a tough one, but there is a corner. It's just a road. It's not even an obstacle, but the way it hits in the corner, the water and flow has come through. It's created this divot. That'll be a nice word for it. So when you take this corner, it wants to put the Jeep down. Okay. I don't do well off camber. It is not my forte. I'm going to tell you right now, I would much rather get out. I would love to help spot, take pictures. I'm not doing it because it's about a 27 degree, I think it is, which is pretty spooky if you think about it. Most off cambers in the single digits, maybe teens. You get into the late high teens off camber, meaning that the vehicle's like this on a trail, sideways, right? Not up and down, but sideways. You start to panic as a person. It's just normal. Most adrenaline junkies can get to 25, 27, and most Jeeps are going to roll around 45 degrees, just to give you an estimation. Anyway, this is about 27 degrees. So when you come into this corner, you've got this 27 degree plus this dip. To this day, I cannot be if I'm driving it, I'm okay because the driver's on this side and it's tipping on this side. I cannot be a passenger. I just can't. My panic can't. The other one is down in the desert by Calico, which is a Calico ghost town. If people know where that is. And there is a thing called Pucker Pass, and it's part of the trails. It's a good, beautiful, meandering desert type thing. But what's happened is this solid rock has sort of created another divot, but it's not a point. It's just got this hole in it, in a sense. Okay. You have to get lined up so close to so it's a big wall, and then you have the trail here, but there's this divot or this hole, this kind of where the rock is missing. Now, it's on the driver's side. So again, I'm happy to spot you through it. I can get you through every single time, but I don't want to drive it. So the front dips like this, and then the rear is worse because you're thinking you're through, and then this dip happens and you're going, I'm going to die, right? But you have to be so close to that side of the mountain that if you're not on that line, I would imagine you could roll. So there are some things out there that picking your line is super important. And again, both of those spotters are helpful. If you don't mind a little off camber, you probably don't mind the Holcomb Creek one. And I think over time it fills and gets worse and gets whatever. But anyway, that's my Sharon of make sure you pick your right line because those 2, that's enough to make you go, it's fun.
It's all part of the fun, right?
It's all part of the fun. So, all right. Well, I'm good as Sharon picking the line. You want to add anything else? We can wrap it up and let people enjoy listening to us. So.
Absolutely. Well, that's it for this episode of Chic Chat. We hope you've been inspired by our stories, insights, and tips. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the Jeep Talk Show so that you never miss an episode.
That's right. And if you have any other ideas for us, Amanda and I would love to explore things that you want to hear from us, you want us to talk about, because I will do all kinds of newbie stuff because that's what I love doing. I love teaching. I love training. But at the same time, we've got experiences too that we're going to be sharing. So anyway, let us know. We would love to do that. Jeep Talk Show /contact. You can, wait a minute, xjtalk.com/contact. Put that .com in there. You can also catch us on all of our socials, right? We're on Instagram, YouTube. We've got Facebook. So make sure you're following and liking us. We love that. So, all right. Until next time, it was so good to see you again, Amanda. We'll just pick up another topic and get at it again.
Yes, ma'am. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Broadcasting since 2010.
You're my friend. You're my new friend.